Uh, Thank you very much for the nice words of introduction. I'm extremely thankful to Professor Sachidanand and Kerala Sahitya Academy and the International Literature Festival Kerala for inviting us from Delhi to this beautiful city of yours, where historically this event has been repeatedly organized in support of literature. The International Literature Festival being organized in these dark times through which our nation is passing uh, is in itself a statement. I also believe that Kerala is not only a place which God made with green thumb, but is a special place in the country at the moment where one can breathe freely in these times. It's very difficult to breathe freely, and you can't imagine, in fact, how we feel and what we are going through in northern part of India. In the morning, we got up, and as we landed, by this time we get a news that our very close friend, Harsh Mandar's house has been once again raided. So one after the other, these news keep on coming. And it is relentless that you are receiving one bad news after another. Therefore, coming here and spending some time with friends in Kerala is really a special thing for us at the moment. Coming to what we were told to do here is share some of our experience and speak on the subject of literature and activism. Now, if we have to talk about literature and activism, and we were told that we will be talking to each other, then it was very difficult to decide what to do. Because normally what happens in the last 40 years that she has been talking and I have been listening. But here we were told to converse with each other. So what we decided was that I'll keep on asking questions and prompting Shabnam to share her experience as activist and keenly interested in literature. But before that, there are one or two points that I would like to make. In my opinion, literature, any piece of literature or any piece of art could be divided broadly in two categories. Literature that inspires activism or literature that does not inspire activism, which is a votary of status quo in the society. And when we talk about activism, my understanding is that activism leads to disturbing the order in order to change it either for a better future or for something which could be worse than the present. But generally, when we talk of activism, we talk of progressive activism, and whatever is reactionary, we do not call it activism, which is valid as far as I'm concerned. And when we talk of literature as an instrument of leading to some kind of activism, then we need to understand that there is a very close relationship between both. If we look at the history of literature itself, very often the literature which has survived in human history and has become part of the treasure of humanity has always been informed by activism or has led to activism. The other kind of literature, which is reactionary, they also do have literature, they also produce literature. Fascism also produces songs and stories and posters and banners and whatnot. But that dies whenever fascism has died. It has not survived. It has not become part of the human treasure. The other point that needs to be made, in my opinion, is that how do you talk about literature? What is this literature? And can you categorize literature? There have been many categories that have been developed over a period of time by experts. But if you ask me, there are again two categories of literature. Literature that is good literature and literature that is bad literature. When I say that there is good literature and bad literature, then how do I justify myself calling some literature as good literature or another type of literature which is bad literature? If you ask me, then definition of good literature is again twofold. The literature which has treated the entire treasure of literature which we have inherited at any given point of time and have treated it well. We have absorbed it. We have tried to develop it further and add to the treasure, human treasure of literature. That is parameter 1 for me. Parameter 2 is more important for me than the parameter 1. Parameter 1 is that you understand whatever tradition you have inherited in any language. It could be Malayalam, it could be Hindi, it could be Urdu, it could be English, it could be German or Japanese. What you have inherited, you try to develop it further and absorb the possibilities of developing the consciousness of younger generation and all possibilities which have emerged in your era or are going to probably emerge in future. But the second parameter is equally important, if not more important. That what is the objective of writing or producing literature? If the objective itself is bad, then even if you have the best of the knowledge of the classics or whatever you have inherited and you have mastered every technique of producing literature, if the objective of production of literature is bad, then I'll call it bad literature. If it supports fascism, if it supports reactionary forces in the country or any society, if it supports violence, if it supports war, then I will call it bad literature. So, while conscious of these two parameters, one will try to talk about our personal experiences of how we have, throughout our life, looked at not only the literature, but also activism and how we have tried to use both activism to support literature and literature to support activism. The last thing before I ask Shabnam to intervene is that at a very mundane level, if literature is supporting sati, if literature is supporting caste system and reinforcing it, if literature produced is supporting maybe untouchability, then there is a problem with the literature. But if we look at our society, today's society, any literature that resists these ailments which mar our society for a very long period of time, which the ailments that have persisted are the ones where literature and activism both have to stand up and say that this is not acceptable. I think there are thousands of young ones today who understand, probably cannot articulate, but understand both the importance of literature and activism, and also understand the relationship between the two, how both of them support each other. Coming to our experiences, and since Shabnam has been known as activist in the country, I would like to ask Shabnam that how she entered into activism, what inspired her to be an activist. Maybe the parents, maybe the siblings, maybe teachers, maybe environment, general environment, maybe a piece of literature. What would you consider as the most important thing that inspired you to move on this path of activism?
Well, I would say that it was a combination of all these factors. I was very lucky to be born in a family which was extremely progressive. And as a teenager, though we did not have full meals in the house because our family was totally devastated during the partition, but we had the access to best of the books. And both my parents were extremely progressive. And they talked about the freedom struggle. We heard stories of Gandhi and Nehru from my father, who had spent 4 years in jail. He was member of the Communist Party of India. It was the first Red family of Delhi because my grandmother, my father, his brothers, they were all in the Communist Party of India. So on one hand, we had this kind of atmosphere at home, and you asked if there were a piece of literature. There are two books which as a teenager had a very strong impression on me. One was a book which everyone would know, The Diary of Anne Frank. And the second book, very few people have read probably. That was called The Story of Zoya and Shura. Zoya and Shura were two young brother and sister, and when Germany attacked Moscow, when their forces reached Moscow during the Second World War, then Zoya joined the underground guerrilla forces to fight the Germans, fight the fascists. And she successfully did a lot of actions, but she was caught, very badly tortured, and hung. And her mother had written about it. And I think that was a book which really made a very deep impact on me. So the conditions were there, not to run after a career or earn money, but it was a coincidence. I was in Delhi, I was studying abroad, I was in Delhi on vacation. Someone asked me to help teach in a Basti, which was Nizamuddin Basti in Delhi. And my first students turned out to be a girl called Farida who was married at 12.
May I interject? When did it happen?
This is 1981 when I went to Nizamuddin Basti to teach, and all the
And that was the beginning of it.
that was the beginning. And I thought I was going into the Basti for 2 months during my vacation, but 2 months flew by, and then I thought that I cannot leave these girls because they had never been to school. There 5, 6 girls were there. They had never seen a school. They were made to wear a burqa from the age of 7, 8 years, 9 years, and never. They were not even allowed to move from one lane to the next lane. So it was a very intense fight, and not a fight but persuasion with the parents, with the brothers especially, to let them come to a small learning center. And I ended up spending 8 years there, educating about 400 girls, helping them do their 10th, 12th, many
How
graduation.
old were you?
I was, I think, at that time about 23 years old. I was about 23 years old, and in the Basti, then as the center grew and more girls started coming in, we started, and you at that time
Yeah.
came.
And that is where we fell in love.
That is where we
eventually.
met.
Yeah.
So we ran a library there, which had all kinds of literature, and at that time the atmosphere in the Basti was that girls especially were kept away from certain kind of literature and books, so that library had become a point of conflict, I should say, because on one side we were there wanting to teach girls and wanted to encourage them to read Premchand and all kind of progressive literature and even Soviet literature. On the other hand, there were these very conservative Muslim organizations and who didn't want the girls to, even study. So it was quite an interesting time. 8 years in that Basti.
So, if I remember correctly, we were not only teaching them to pass the high school and later on go to higher classes, but we were also trying to expose them to best of the literature. And that changed their vision completely because they were not exposed to anything that was international. They didn't know that there was a place called Soviet Union, what is happening in the world. They didn't know Premchand, they didn't know what is happening in southern part of India, etc., etc. So that gradually changed them. And would you like to share your experience of Shabano case? What happened there?
It is actually during this period. I worked in Nizamuddin Basti from 1981 till 1989. And 1989 also I would have continued to work if Safdar was not attacked and killed. But in 1986 when the Shahbano case happened and when the Muslim clergy pressurized the government to bring a legislation through which they stopped the Supreme Court judgment. At that time, there was a lot of resistance by the women groups, and I was part of EDWA at that time, Janwadi Mahila Samiti, and there were many very big demonstrations happening in Delhi. So I used to share all that with the girls, and they said that, we also want to be part of this. And that was something which had never happened in that basti. I mean, it was a huge challenge getting the girls out from one gully to come to the center and then ensure that they reach back safely. And suddenly, when they realized that I was taking part in the demonstrations supporting Shah Banu, all of them wanted to come. And it was because of the kind of exposure they had got during this period, the kind of literature that was available to them. So we had a bus full of women from Nizamuddin participating in the demonstration outside the parliament, uh, which was, of course, all of us were taken in and kept in the police station whole day. But after that, there was a huge ruckus in Nizamuddin, and both of us were actually physically attacked by the Muslim clerics for taking the girls out. But that is how I think when you introduce good literature to a section of people who have never have any access, that is how they transform, and that is, I think, uh, the whole aim of activism. It's not that you teach somebody to read and write, but you teach them to fight for their rights and fight for their dignity.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the books, especially Anne Frank and Zoya and Shura. Uh, if I look back, then I think all books that I've read have some contribution in shaping my personality as an activist as well uh, as a scientist. I've learned from almost all the writers. You could probably get an idea of what Newton's laws are by reading purely scientific books. But how Newton's laws can be applied in the society and what impact a particular application of Newton's laws can do to society, that consciousness comes only by entering into activism or literature, both. It is by reading the best of the classics that you come to know what is the relationship between science and, or what is the relationship between economics. Yeah, I started reading Marxism at a very, very early age, but the firmer understanding of Marxism comes from literature. I'm not saying that you, without reading Marxism, you can have understanding of Marxism, but a much deeper understanding which inspires you to become activist based on Marxian theory and practice comes from reading a lot of literature as far as I am concerned. And I remember one of the books that I've read n number of times in my life, and that is Nikolai Ostrovsky's book called How the Steel Was Tempered. And even now, when I want to come out of deep depression, read that book and it's a package of energy for me. You can get back to your how deeply Sahamat impacted, Sabdarashmi Memorial Trust impacted your activism, and how deeply that incident when Sabdar was murdered impacted you and became to become an activist of a different order, which means that the steel was tempered somewhere when the incident happened.
Well, I was actually already working as an activist for 8 years when Safdar was attacked and murdered. And I would have continued to do that work, but when Safdar was alive, I had helped him during one of his proscenium theatres in raising resources. That was Moteramga Satyagraha, which was again a Premchand, based on Premchand's novel, and it was directed by Habib Tanveer. And Safdar had asked me to help him. And during that period, and before that, I had also worked with him uh, when they were raising resources for Bengal famine. So Safda always, when we were discussing whatever things that we got time to, he always wanted me to look after the organizational part of the theatre repertory that he wanted to start. His aim was to start a full-time theatre repertory, and he was collecting money for that. But unfortunately, that never happened. So he had asked me to help him run it logistically. I don't create, I'm not a creative person. I create ideas, but I can't create or write something. So when Safdar was attacked and killed, then I was asked to help with the Safdar Hashmi Memorial Trust. And although I was very deep into my own work, I thought that I owed that to Safdar and to his memory. But very soon, Sehmat, I had told them that I'll give you half a day. But very soon it became, within the first week, it became a 24/7. And the kind of response that came from across India, and they were mainly artists and intellectuals who came together to form Safdar Hashmi Memorial Trust. So I was doing grassroots work, I was teaching women and dealing with Muslim fundamentalists mainly. But with the formation of Sehmat, I suddenly came in contact with a large number of artists from all disciplines, performing artists, poets, writers, and intellectuals, academicians. So that obviously, when you work with people who are intellectually much superior to you, your horizon, your understanding also expands, and that happened with me. And I think in Sehmat, something which worked out very well was that we had the creative and intellectual talent, and in me they had a very good organizer. So that just gelled together. Ideas were created, and there were people to implement them. So within the first 10 days, first month, it became huge, and it continued to be that. I mean, I ran Sehmat for 15 years, and that was very important work.
Would you consider Sahmat to be the best example at that time of a beautiful blend of activism as well as literature, art, and creativity?
Yes, definitely. I don't think that at that time there was any other organization. I would say in North India, because in South, lot of things happen which don't even reach us. So in North India, that was a very important organization, and there were many things. I mean, uh, I'm remembering, since we are talking of literature and activism, in 1991, when the atmosphere in India was getting very communalized, and we were thinking how to, intervene and how to counter the kind of hatred that is being spread. So this idea of doing an exhibition, doing a mobile exhibition came up. It was Vivan Sundaram's idea. The exhibition was called Images and Words. So artists from across India and writers and poets were asked to send their works on canvas, 12 by 12 inches canvas. And we received hundreds of them. They were put together, and they were lovely poetry and text, and in all languages. I think Sachidanandan also had a work there, and I don't remember all the names because it's 1991, but most of the known people had. So on one hand, we had paintings and literature, pure literature, but we converted it into an activist journey, because that exhibition was carried across India, and around that exhibition, so many big programs were organized. So you had these small pieces of literature and art which were working as a catalyst to galvanize people across India to rise against communal forces.
I think after PWA's decline, this was the biggest event that was created in India, which was based on activism as well as literature and art and performing arts as well. The other was a very courageous thing that was taken up, activity, which was taken up just after demolition of Babri Masjid by Fehmat. Uh, please share it.
Yeah, after the Babri Mosque was demolished, again we were thinking of how to intervene. And the idea came to go to Ayodhya.
There was an atmosphere of extreme terror which had
Yes,
swept at least northern part of India. The
at-
aggressive Hindu fundamentalist had just demolished, and there were riots throughout the northern part of India. Yeah.
yes. There were riots, and the atmosphere was full of fear, and people were not speaking out. It is at that point that we decided that we are going to break this siege and enter Ayodhya. Although it required, I mean, I personally must have gone 7, 8 times to meet the governor at that time, Motilal Vora, because the permission was not being given. But finally, we fought our way, got the permission, and we did a program in Ayodhya which started at midnight and continued till morning. This is, I
Next
think,
day morning.
within 1 month of the, I'm forgetting the date, but within 1 or 2 months of the demolition. So for this campaign, a number of artists, visual artists, and historians created an exhibition which was called Hum Sab Ayodhya. And it's a very, very important piece of literature because a lot of research was done on that. I was not part of that, I was looking after a lot of coordination work. But they digged out everything from archives, from all kinds of places, and the whole history of Ayodhya was created. The kind of different Ramayans that exist traditionally in India. There was a whole panel on that. The 10 or 11 kinds of Ramayans were there. And the kind of architecture that existed in Ayodhya and still exists, and the fact that it was very diverse, it was plural, it was a amalgamation of different cultures. So on taking all this and the music of Ayodhya, a very important exhibition was created. And I think that was, if we are talking of especially literature and activism, that's a very important exhibition and an important program in the history of those times, at least.
In northern part of India.
In northern part, yes.
India, yeah.
But for that event, people came from all over. People came from all over India. It was called Hamsa Ayodhya, and a very, very significant program because before us, nobody had dared enter Ayodhya at that time.
So you broke the atmosphere of fear, and the ice was broken, and then many other programs happened later on, but that's history. Uh, then 2002 happens, and in Gujarat we know that anything between one has never known how many people were killed because the government has given some data and the other organizations have always challenged the number of people that were killed in Gujarat. But after partition, probably that was the largest number of people that were killed in any of the carnages in the country. And that changed your life once again as an activist. You floated unheard. Why? Number one. Number two, what was the level of now interaction between literature and activism?
Yes, that's true. I think it's not only me, but anybody who went to Gujarat at that time, I think their lives changed because the kind of violence and hatred that we witnessed on the ground, it was unimaginable in free India. And especially because I was documenting the stories of gang rape survivors. So I had met about 38 women. I had documented stories of 38 women who were gang raped and who had survived. So that had totally shaken me and shaken us as a family because you were also there documenting things. And that is when we realized that, whatever we are doing in Delhi, that is not enough. Very important work, working with artists and intellectuals within Sehmat, but that was confined to Delhi or some big cities most of the time, except when we traveled with exhibitions and other things. And I felt very restless. So at that time I had come to Kerala and met Professor K. N. Panikar, because I always and still consider him my mentor, and I always valued his suggestions a lot. And I spoke to Professor Panikar and I said, I'm feeling very restless and I can't sit in Delhi after what has happened in Gujarat. So he encouraged me. He said, there is a need to start a new organization which will do very different kind of work. And we decided to do uh, ideological training of young people. So that was the reason for fighting hatred. Also during this period, I spent almost 1 year working in Gujarat in 2002. And the kind of literature that I saw, you were talking about good and bad literature. The literature that I have seen personally, Vish Hindu Parishad literature, Vish Hindu Parishad leaflet, uh, talking about how you should keep your daughters away from the Muslim boys, which has now become huge thing, love jihad. It was happening 2002, they were spreading these hateful messages and rumors about how Muslim boys would take away your girls. I have seen leaflets which were meant for doctors and which openly said that you can give medicines which are expired if you don't, I mean,
To Muslim patients.
to Muslim patients. And there were so many stories coming from hospitals where Muslim patients were not treated or treated wrongly deliberately. So one
Their
understood,
limbs were operated and cut out.
yes,
Very
in
deliberately,
cases
yeah.
that also happened. So it was very clear that if we have to counter this hatred, we need to have a strategy, we need to have literature which would, one, counter their, now we call it fake news, where at that time fake news was not the word used, which would counter their hate, their leaflets and pamphlets which are full of hate, but also give another vision to the young people of, what kind of country that we want. So we mainly started Anhad with that motive in our minds, and in the first 10 years, we ended up more than 30,000 young people have attended the residential camps that we used to organize for giving the ideas of democracy and secularism. Initially, they were,
And Ram Punyani's books.
yes, I was coming to
Yeah,
that. That
yeah.
initially the first set of workshops, residential camps that we did, they were mainly sessions and followed by movement songs and film. Film screening was very important in every single session. But after the first set of 7 residential camps, we realized that without literature, we won't be able to uh, contain this change which has come during the 7 days. So we asked Ram Punyani to give us a book, and he was very good at talking about myths and realities. So then we published Ram Punyani's books in thousands. In every workshop, we gave a copy to whoever had come to attend, so that when they go back, they have something to carry back with them. And we don't have much time because we need to open up for question and answer.
Yeah.
So I would like to just mention 2, 3 more things about how literature and activism for us has always been together, running into each other. There was, in 2004, we had done a program for young people. We were constantly thinking how to engage young people. And we did a program called Battle of Bands and invited 11 youth bands to come and perform for us. But we said we will give you uh, we did it in National Stadium, which was huge. We are giving you a platform, but you give us at least one new song. So during that, it was a music program, but in one day we had 11 new songs uh, performed. So they were, of course, they must have thought about it, they must have discussed, they must have written the song, composed it. So we engaged them in the process of creating literature for peace and for non-violence. So we have done, Anand has done a lot of that with young artists. We have got many artists to prepare special repertoires for Anhad programs, which are for peace, for harmony, for brotherhood, sisterhood, and so on.
Would you like to discuss about how posters, banners, and leaflets were used for activism, and we dug out quotations and songs and
Yes, we have.
all kinds of things?
I actually brought with me some leaflets and postcards, and there are lots there. I thought anybody who wants them can take them. Uh,
Could you distribute them? They're there. Yeah.
I would just talk about one campaign. In 2012, I had gone to Porbandar, and it was very
They are there in this.
difficult for me to find the place where Gandhi was born. I had to ask a lot of people that, where is the birthplace of Gandhi? Because there were no signs, nothing, no arrows pointing to Gandhi's birthplace. So we decided that we would paste Gujarat, whole of Gujarat, with Gandhi posters. And as part of that campaign, we produced 10 new posters and we printed 1 lakh posters. And along with that, we produced these postcards. Uh, what is written at the back might be in Hindi, but we have used, this is like Gopal Gandhi, which is Gandhi's grandson, Ila Gandhi. We requested them to write to us, send us text about them. So we have
Ila
used
Gandhi from South Africa.
Ila Gandhi from South Africa, Malika Sarabhai, Professor Romila Thapa, and so we have constantly used, and I'm sure people who are here also use poetry uh, and other quotations constantly on our leaflet. This is a bookmark which also has poetry. This is something which we had created in Kashmir. Copies of these are there for anyone who wants to. This we distributed during Baatein Aman Ki campaign, which was held. So mainly we have been using progressive poetry on our banners, on our postcards, on leaflets, and we use leaflet as a major means of communication, especially now when the news doesn't cover you, when there is fake news produced every single day. In these times, leaflets and postcards are very important means of communication.
Yeah, I think um, the time is running out very fast, and we will not have any discussion if we run out of time. How much time do we have? 15 minutes. I just want to make, in the end, one or two points and finish off very quick points. One, the first point is that I'm extremely thankful to Sahitya Academy for looking back at our lives from this perspective, that how our activism was informed by literature and how the literature that was being produced and used by us was informed by our activism, and it was a dialectical relationship between the two. However, in my opinion, I've always had complaint with our progressive forces that they may not consider literature, poetry, a piece of art, an article, or very important, and they may consider a song only as an instrument to gather people before the big leaders are going to deliver their lectures. But fascists do know the importance of a piece of literature. They know that the poem written by Mueller in Germany, I did not speak, has resonance throughout the world even today. Whenever there is an attack and violent attack and people don't speak out, this particular poem, I'm sure you'll agree with me, is repeated a number of times. I did not speak out. They came for communist first. I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Look at this poem, how important it is. United States Holocaust Museum has displayed this poem, but the first line has been removed. Why? Because the poem begins by saying first they came for the communists. They did not want to use this word. It begins from they came for the socialist. So they know what a poem can do. And therefore, when somebody says that will there be singing in dark times, and Bertolt Brecht replies, yes, there will be singing about dark times, then they know the importance of the poem. And we have very recently, during the CEA movement, saw that how a poem written about 40 years back by Faiz Ahmad Faiz, on the other side of the border, where it was almost crushed, comes to India, used during the CA movement, attacked by the reactionary forces, and then it crosses all the borders from Stellenbosch University in South Africa to Germany to Japan to universities just lapped it up. Young ones started singing this poem. So this poem has about 132 words. But it's a powerful poem. And they know it. And therefore they attack it. So defending the literature is also our responsibility, especially in dark times. Thank you. Have questions?
So we have about 10 minutes. If anybody wants to ask a question, you are welcome.
Namaskar. My name is Vijayan. I lived in Delhi for almost 4 decades, and even now I shudder the day when on 1st January 1989, when Sardar was eliminated cruelly, and in all the subsequent years, I used to be in Maulankar Hall for the Sahamat programs. I have been witnessing this art on wheels. I think that was the exhibition which traveled all across the nation. And about good literature and bad literature, broadly we can say, literature that embraces everyone and treats everybody as equal, and inclusivity, that which generates inclusivity is good literature. And literature that invokes to hate others is bad literature. And maybe I think Sardar has created so much literature for even small children. In fact, I used to recite many of Sardar's poems to my daughter when she was a 4-year-old or something. So maybe I request if you can recite a few lines of Sardar's poem, in case if it is just a couplet. Thank you.
I will have to look for them. I don't remember them by heart.
Okay.
The one which I love the most is Kitabein Karti Hain Baatein.
Yes, in that
Beat-
Azadi, there is a poem, I think, if
Yes,
I remember
there is
right.
there's a poem
about
Azadi. There are
yes.
many poems for children.
How the child visualizes, and if I remember vaguely, I think.
Garwad Ghotala.
Yes, and then it says, what does Azadi mean? What does freedom means? Then the child so innocently says, "Us din sabko chutti hota hai." I think it concludes like that. Thank you.
Safdar had written quite a few songs also. So those are also still used, like औरतें उठी नहीं तो जुल्म बढ़ता जाएगा. That we use a lot, that
एंड
poem
मेरा
and
जन्म
song.
हुआ था भाई कितनी ही सदियों पहले, कोई मुझको कहे एकता कोई भाईचारा कह ले. That poem has been sung by many groups across the country and it's very powerful. But I just wanted to make a clarification here that Vijayan, but when we are saying that there is good literature and bad literature, then even the progressive literature could be bad literature if it is not beautifully written. See, even the progressive people, and there are many examples, will not survive because it doesn't become part of good literature. The intense feeling could be there. They may be writing for the working class, they may be writing, but they have not really respected the entire treasure that they have received from the ancestors. And they do not follow. Yeah. Right. But when the two things, on both these things, a piece of literature takes into account both these things, that how you have treated the tradition, you could break the tradition, but if you do not know your tradition, then there is a problem. So if you do not know the grammar of how a story is written, then you are likely to produce a bad piece of literature.
Anyone else? We have just 5 more minutes.
सिवा तो अपने सामने आखिर खड़ा हुआ है इतना खतरा पैदा करके, और आसानी से तो हम उसका सामना कर पाएंगे जब लोगों को आपस में इतने विभाजित करके खंडित करने का षड्यंत्र चल रहा है. और हाल ही में शबनम जी ने तो एक ये नारा बुलंद किया था, मेरे घर आके तो देखो. ये भाईचारे को बनाए रखने और समाज को एकजुट करने का जो प्रयास था, इसे आगे कैसे हम ले जा सकते हैं?
देखिए, एक तो ये कि should I speak in Hindi or everyone might? English is fine. मेरे घर आके तो देखो is a very interesting campaign, as you know, because Kerala, everyone was, quite a lot of people were part of it. It's an ongoing campaign, but it is a campaign. One campaign cannot change everything. If it can be done at a large scale, then it can definitely reduce the differences between different communities. Because when you actually enter somebody's home, you realize that the preconceived notions and all the information that has been fed to you is really not true. And we have had fantastic response to the campaign all over. I mean, for example, we had taken 25 people to Kashmir and they lived in villages. So they were totally transformed because the only thing they know about Kashmir is terrorism and bomb blast. For the first time, they saw that they are beautiful people and they are the best host probably in India. There is no other community which looks after the guests so well as Kashmiris do. So if this can be taken forward, then definitely it can make a difference. We are right now in the middle of another national campaign, especially reaching out to women. We are launching it on 21st February in Karnataka. There was Rani Chinnamma from Kittur, who in 1928 fought a war against British, and in the first round she defeated them. So invoking her strength, invoking her will to fight against oppression, we are reaching out to women to come together and defeat these forces of fascism. But these are extremely difficult times. One campaign cannot stop them. And I think people in Kerala should be extremely worried and they should do something about it. Because their target is Kerala. They have not been able to break Kerala so far. Because in Kerala, controlling minds is very difficult. This is a land where people think and read and study and argue. It's not like many other states in North where they have totally controlled the minds, where, I mean, all of us call them bhakts, where they do not have any rationality left. So it's very important that people in Kerala fight against these forces, because if the rest of India falls, then it will be very difficult to hold on to Kerala. But these are very difficult times. There is no guarantee that you and I and all of us can defeat them.
As we draw the curtains on this enlightening conversation between Ms. Shabnam Hashmi, Mr. Gawhar Raza, and the profound interplay of literature and activism, I extend my heartfelt gratitude. Thank you for being part of an evening that not only celebrated the power of words, but also ignited the flame of change. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this conversation.